Hello everyone, this is the first of a series of videos dedicated to the chemistry of the stratosphere. We are going to be looking at the chemical composition of the Earth atmospheres and the different layers. We're going to be looking specifically to the stratosphere, to one of those layers, and the composition of the stratosphere, and the concentration and distribution of a particular component in the stratosphere, ozone. The formation of ozone and the decomposition of ozone. We'll also be going to look specifically at the properties and the behavior of what we call the ozone layer, which is based on the stratosphere, and the properties of particular chemicals, specifically chlorofluorocarbons, but not exclusively, to affect that ozone layer. We'll also be looking at something called the ozone hole, the process of ozone thinning at the poles, mostly the South Pole, and how that process comes about, and the chemistry, the region, the year variation, the influence of the weather patterns, etc., on that ozone thinning in the formation of that ozone hole. As usual, this content will be separated in several videos to make it easier to follow. So, the Earth atmosphere, a thin shell of gases that surround the Earth. The portion of the first 80-odd kilometers of the atmosphere, which is where human activity takes place, adds around 0.3% to the total Earth's radius. And it has a very unique chemistry, mostly oxygen, a little bit of nitrogen, and some carbon dioxide, and a series of gases that support life on Earth. The atmosphere on Earth creates a protective layer. It reabsorbs infrared radiation reflected from the Earth, so it doesn't go back into space, and that keeps the surface temperature at a moderate, around 15 degrees average. This is a table from the American Chemical Society with 4 different planets and the composition of their atmosphere, their observed temperature, their average temperature, real temperature, both in Kelvin and centigrades, and their predicted temperature. And that predictions has been done using the black body model, physical model. So as you can see, when you have a planet like Mercury, which has no atmosphere, just a very thin layer of exosphere, or Mars that has a very, a very low pressure atmosphere, very little atmosphere, the prediction from the black body model and the actually observed recorded temperature in the planet is quite similar. However, when you have planets like Venus or Earth that have a more substantial atmosphere in both cases, the prediction and the real temperature is actually quite different. And that is because that layer of atmosphere on the planet changes the way the planet's surface interacts with the solar radiation, and it changes the temperature, the average temperature the surface of the planet reaches. Composition of the Earth's atmosphere. The major components near the surface are nitrogen, mostly nitrogen, 78%, oxygen a bit under 21%, and then some carbon dioxide, argon, neon, etc. These percentages, this mixing ratio of these major gases is relatively constant up to 80 kilometers. At higher altitudes, because of the availability of solar radiation, photochemical processes occur. So chemistry facilitated by the sun, by the solar rays. And the major components, nitrogen, N2, dinitrogen, or molecular nitrogen, and the compound O2, dioxygen or molecular oxygen, dissociate into their elements. There are also quite a few trace gases, small quantities but very important to the atmosphere chemistry. 1 to 3% of water vapor, and quite a few other trace gases. The level of some of those gases is important because some of them, although they occur naturally in higher quantities when released by a human process, by an anthropogenic source, they are pollutants. So we will be looking at in future videos, the chemistry of carbon, specifically carbon dioxide, the chemistry of sulfur, specifically sulfur dioxide, and the chemistry of nitrogen oxides. And we will see how monitoring their levels is important because many of them are produced by anthropogenic sources, which add to the natural level on the Earth's atmosphere of those gases, and that causes pollution problems. The atmosphere is stratified. It has, even within the same elements in general, those are in a different chemical form and they interact different with the light. And you can see here in this photo of the Endeavour space shuttle that you can clearly see the different layers of the atmosphere, which reflects, those colors reflect that slightly different composition in terms of the chemical species those elements are. So you've got the orange layer, which is the troposphere, that white layer here, intermediate is the stratosphere, and then you have the mesosphere as that sort of blue section. This is an schematic diagram representing how quite a lot of information about the atmosphere. You've got the temperatures, and the red line represents the different temperatures of the different layers of the atmosphere. And as you can see, there are several temperature inversions. The temperature increases and the temperature decreases and then increases depending on which layer you are. And we will see that that's because as a direct result of the chemistry in those layers. You also have the different names: the troposphere, the stratosphere, mesosphere, and the outermost layer, the thermosphere. And as I mentioned in a previous slide, this atmosphere is stratified. There are kind of defined layers of this. Temperature inversion means that there is very little mixing ratio between the different layers, and there are defined barriers between the different parts of the atmosphere, the poses, the tropopause, the stratopause, and the mesopause. We also see how the temperature changes. It reduces as you move further away from the surface. We also see that there are different levels of solar radiation penetrating the different levels of the atmosphere, and different wavelengths will reach different sections of the atmosphere, different layers, and that will have a direct effect in the chemical species for that particular level. So in the troposphere, we have the gases that we have discussed earlier, major nitrogen and oxygen, and some water vapor and CO2, etc. The stratosphere, with slightly higher energy, you start finding molecules like ozone, which is unstable, but it is formed unstable, and it's unstable. It is formed in significant proportions in that level of that region of the atmosphere. The mesosphere, where you start stabilizing certain radicals and certain ions. And finally, the thermosphere, in which you slightly have, again, slightly different compounds, forms, protonated forms, for example, that are not typically stable at surface, in the surface, or even the atomic elements not forming part of a compound, but as separated atoms, like atoms of nitrogen or atoms of oxygen.